Well, good afternoon and good morning to everybody. How are you doing? Welcome to another one of our LinkedIn Live sessions with key founders and executives in the CX realm. I'm Tom Lewis. I lead our consulting and analytics practice within TTEC Digital, what we like to refer to as a strategic GSI, strategic meaning CX focus and global systems integrator. But today, I have a fantastic guest in Colin Kennedy, who's one of the founders of Shelf. And Colin, welcome to the discussion today. Thanks for joining. We're not going to spend a lot of time talking about TTEC. We're not going to spend a lot of time talking about Shelf, but just for the headline so that people know, why don't you hum a few bars on what Shelf is?
Sure. We're a next-gen knowledge management platform that simply puts an emphasis on the governance and accuracy of unstructured data so that organizations that are looking to deploy Gen AI can actually be successful in those initiatives and not stress out over hallucinations, bad data finding its way into the conversation, sensitive data finding its way into the conversation, all those things that we hear about in the news that we don't want to have happen.
Got it. Thank you. And again, welcome. I appreciate the time. We'll have opportunity for questions at the end, so cue those up. Colin, you dropped a few buzzwords in there, but I want to give my sort of 2 cents around knowledge management. I've been in the CX consulting space for a very long time, and knowledge management always ends up at the back of the bus. It was, I don't know how to describe it. Out of date, unorganized, silos, etc. And what I keep hearing is it's actually the keys to the castle as it relates to leveraging unstructured data, as you pointed out, but information for the purposes of customers and agents and so forth. Connect those dots? What changed? Is it all Gen AI that changed, or what's causing? And is my assertion correct that it's now sort of at the front of the bus compared to the past?
I'd say it's certainly moving up towards the front of the bus. And I believe that, in the next 6 to 9, 12 months, it will firmly be at the front of the bus. And I agree with your assertion that it was at the back of the bus.
Okay.
And I think the main reason, well, there are 2 main reasons. One is a lot of knowledge management solutions were clunky, are still clunky, and actually didn't solve the problem that they promised to solve, which was effective governance of the documents and files. Like, can I manage this stuff, and can I make it easy for my end users to actually find what they need? That's one thing. And the other is that it's really hard to manage this unstructured data. There's so much of it. It's so easy to create content, not so easy to, let's call it, audit, make sure that it's still relevant, that it's keeping up with the changing nature of businesses. And so it was just this problem that nobody really wanted to deal with. And so it was shunned and it was put in the corner. And Gen AI has really actually been that forcing function, because now there's a technology that is so good at fetching information wherever it is, and people don't really know what it's going to fetch. So
that sounds scary.
Yeah, it is scary.
So, what from a at the same time, you still have, I'll say, information atrophy. In other words, on the one hand, you have an upfront exercise to synthesize all of your knowledge and try to figure out how to organize it. And most companies are really not in the spot to start that conversation, and they need some homework before they can actually benefit from all of that. But even if they have their house in order, I still have this impression that, like I said, the information and the content can atrophy. Is there a magic bullet for that, or is that still, how does software solve that problem?
Yeah, it's a great question. So first off, I agree. I'll talk about it as entropy, atrophy, basically the same things, but it's this natural condition that exists in our world that things tend to degrade over time, and data is no different. And knowledge is just unstructured data. The words in the text, just think of that as data. It's not zeros and ones, it's something slightly different. It naturally atrophies as things change within the business and the world around the business. And there was never really a good magic bullet, which again goes back to why it was sitting in the back of the bus. It's like, it's too hard. You need to put too many humans behind this on too frequent of a basis for this to work to some degree. I'm talking about like large scale across an enterprise. Certainly there's ways to keep information accurate, up to date, and trusted. Like that can happen. Just enterprise wide, it's hard. The magic bullet is, I'll call it to some degree Gen AI, right? Like Gen AI brought this problem to the surface, but at least the way that we look at it is from a monitoring and a diagnosis perspective. These are things that we've asked humans to do on an occasional basis, so an annual audit, a semi-annual audit. We can now deploy technology to continuously evaluate this large corpus of data and actually find relationships which lead to identification of issues that would be really hard for even a large team of humans to identify. So that's the magic bullet. Gen AI has kind of raised the importance of unstructured data and knowledge content, and also it can be its salvation to at the same time.
Got it. So we've been talking, I don't know what the right way to describe this, at a low level in terms of the operationalization of knowledge in an environment. But let me pull up the level a little bit and talk about at I'll say the business and contact center level. If you were only in a 10-story building and you had to give your elevator pitch relative, not to shelf necessarily, but more specifically on why knowledge organization matters to them. Because keep in mind, somebody who owns that, they're concerned about cost reduction, revenue, and CSAT. And my assumption is somewhere in the middle, this is all relevant to that, but is there more to the story, or is it that? So what's the elevator pitch that you can give without being too buzzwordy?
Okay. The elevator pitch without being too buzzwordy is getting knowledge right, unstructured data management right, is one of the few things that can actually lift multiple tides. Oftentimes within the contact center, there's this inherent trade-off. If we're going to go faster, our quality is going to drop. If we improve our quality, right, our efficiency metrics, our things like handle time will increase. Knowledge is pretty cool in that regard, right? If you find the way to deliver the right information at the right time to the right person, then you have a happier customer, a more empowered agent that's communicating with that customer. And through just smarter delivery, you're shortening those interaction times. So it's one of those things that is a multiplier effect for a lot of the KPIs that you referenced, Tom.
Got it. So, and maybe this isn't up or down, maybe it's more sideways. I'd like to go into like a use case kind of scenario. So maybe you could walk us through a story where a consumer or a consumer of the brand, I'll call it that way, so generic, has a need, and maybe a little bit of a before and after in terms of their interface with the business that's effectively using knowledge management, content strategy, et cetera. Hopefully that's enough to guide you in terms of what I'm looking for is something that I could explain to to an 8th grader.
Okay. Yeah. Case study, if you will, use case. So let's imagine, since we're not naming names, we're going to leave this as an unnamed Fortune 500 that was struggling. Well, let's keep it just in that contact center realm, struggling to meet the expectations of a contract that they had in place, right? They had a service level agreement with their end client that we're going to successfully resolve callers' questions at a certain level. That's the SLA, is answer accuracy or first contact resolution, whatever you want to call it. They were unable to do so and tried to implement many different technologies and approaches within their contact center to boost that number. And nothing seemed to work. In fact, it kept getting worse. Until someone said, well,
what just for a second. So like nothing seemed to work. What were the traditional things that they were trying to do? Sorry to break your thread here on the story, but.
Yeah, sure. This is more training, so different training approaches and enablement for their contact center agents. Let's call it workforce management and optimization, designing call queues, like, all right, how are we going to build our flows to connect to the right people, things like that.
Okay. I often refer to that as operational excellence. So they were doing standard operational excellence things up to that point. All right.
Yep.
So continue on with the story.
Yeah, sure thing. So at some point, a leader came along and said, well, are we actually, thinking about this in the right way? What material are we providing to our agents in the moment that they actually need it to support the customers, the callers? And it was a big question mark, right? It's like, we know where this stuff is. Okay. Do agents even use this stuff?
Okay.
Don't even have visibility into that. So it's like, all right, we've been kind of maybe maintaining something. Have we really been maintaining this? I don't know. Not a lot of understanding about that either. And once you start to peel back the layers very quickly, it's like, no, this is just an abandoned mass of documents and files and wiki articles on how to do things. And it was maybe technically accurate, but wasn't actually thoughtfully presented to a human in a way that they could digest that and have another conversation with a human at the same time, which is what we're asking customer service agents to do, in effect. And so it was, okay, let's get a handle on this. Let's figure out how good or bad it is. Let's not make any judgments, like what's usable and what isn't. So can we diagnose this in terms of a quality and an efficacy and an accuracy perspective? And then can we also actually involve the consumers a little bit more? Can we, take analytics and diagnostics and combine that with voice of the agent, if you will, to continually set a flywheel motion of improvement around the content? And when you do that, a couple things happen. One is the experience improves. And then also it kind of creates a better, healthier dynamic for the agents, because they're like, oh, I'm not just shouting into the void, right? Like if I say like, this is confusing, actually there's mechanisms in place, basic things, but important things that allow for a healthy relationship around the knowledge. And so, cut to future state, first contact resolution metrics at an all-time high, no longer in breach of SLA.
Got it. So I have this, I've been in enough companies and call centers and so forth there, there are lots of different departments and, there's information that should flow back and forth. And I can see this as being, sort of the theme that we were just talking about. But there's another dimension too that I often see in contact centers, which is there's a set of content that's created for internal consumption, and there's a set of content that's created for external consumption. And they vary in terms of in a lot of different ways. Is that part of the harmonizing, or is that how should a company think about their internal facing content versus their external facing content?
Yeah, I think it's simple. The most important thing to think about when you're talking about internal versus external is that content may or may not reside in the same store or repository. The most important thing is that there is a cohesive and standardized governance process that will bind it together on the back end. The ability to evaluate and not create silos. Like, it's okay for there to be a functional silo around content because that's much more practical. It's not always realistic to have a monolithic single source of truth, kind of a buzzword. Great if you can do it, not always reasonable. So what you want to do is say, all right, based on what's possible in the business, let's at least get the governance and the maintenance right, and make sure that we're really dialed in to be able to understand that when changes are happening, that it may impact different sets of stakeholders, and that there should be an efficient way to course correct whatever text, video, copy that you're planning to deliver to those end users.
Got it. Now I'm going to put you on the spot, if I haven't already, a little bit around numbers. And so what I mean by that is, I think that somebody thinking about improving their operation and their customer experience and their cost and all those kind of things, certainly can see the benefit, particularly at least at a customer experience level. But if you were inside an organization and had already done all the operational excellence things, and you're like, okay, I think we need to step up our game. We need to solve this problem around all of the content and unstructured data, make this more usable, accessible. How should the leader of the contact center or that part of the business, hypothetically, or percentage-wise or whatever, how should they be speaking to the CFO about the economic impact and benefit associated with doing this type of implementation, transition, evolution, whatever you want to call it?
Yeah. Well, I think what's important to keep in mind is to start with what are they already actually measuring today? As if you're measuring nothing, like, to start with, then it's very hard to say, like, what was the before and after.
Well, they know their cost for sure. So if that's, and then, but anyway, keep going.
Yeah. But let's just say average handle time is a metric that almost everybody measures, right?
Sure.
So think about when we talk about cost savings, I think about talking about the CFO in reductions in average handle time. Typically, organizations are creating baseline metrics around time for new agents to go to incubate. And then some are also measuring time to proficiency as measured downstream by like quality monitoring and things of that nature. I think that you should be talking to them about efficiencies gained in that way. Shorter incubation periods and faster times to proficiency. And then I'm, assuming that the business has some way of quantifying the benefit of improving their NPS or their CSAT by a couple of points. I would think about it in those types of terms.
Got it. So shifting gears on you a little bit, when a company comes to you, what's the how are they postulating the problem that they're trying to solve? So in other words, very often I will get a customer call in and says, we want, this technology. So, well, hang on a second, what's the problem you're trying to solve? And so how do companies normally present themselves to you in terms of the pain or problem they're trying to solve? Granted, where they go after that and how you educate them and so forth, but I'm trying to get the first volley. What does it look like?
Yeah. Well, that's changed quite a bit over the last 12 to 18 months.
Okay.
So historically, the pain would be communicated in ways such as like, my agents can't find anything, like something like that. And now it's shifted in that everybody's forcing, or everybody's talking about Gen AI. In some cases, there's like mandates being forced top down upon CX leaders to like deploy Gen AI in the contact center because it's been identified as one of the prime departments and functions for using Gen AI. And so it's changed quite a bit, where there's been new people kind of coming into the conversation around, we're trying to, utilize this, next gen conversational AI chatbot that we bought, or we're trying to leverage a Microsoft Copilot, or we built our own, whatever it is, and we can't get out of the training room, if you will. Like we're not even able to get this out into production and give this to our customer service representatives because we don't trust what's going to come out on the other end. We don't have enough visibility into what's going in or what's coming out. And that's giving a ton of anxiety to our functional leaders, certainly to our compliance and legal teams,
right.
Because there's a lot of risk there. And it's like more about like, how can we actually start to realize the ROI for the business case that we already made around this Gen AI initiative?
Gotcha. Well, and you may have partially answered this question, but just maybe some final thoughts on, okay, so you're having a discussion, everybody understands the pain, the objective, et cetera, but they're still not pulling the trigger on moving forward on this. What's typically the objection or roadblocker inside an organization that prevents them from moving, at least today? You might convince them again in 6 months or a year.
Yeah, it's interesting. So you started talking about like back of the bus to the front of the bus. It's still to some degree the same type of resistance, although that resistance is, let's call it diminishing slightly, and it's changing a little bit, right? So with respect to Gen AI initiatives, RAG, most Gen AI initiatives, it's pretty clear in the market are RAG-based use cases. It's more comfortable for the people that are implementing this, who are typically more technical in nature, to like, let's call it like build the piping and the plumbing, the infrastructure of how things will get fed in itself. And it's like, well, maybe we could wait a little bit longer on assessing the data quality, right? And people tend to fool themselves and say, all right, like we're going to feed as part of our test 10 or 50 documents to this and see how it goes. Guess what? People curated those and made sure that the tests are going to go great. And then it's like, all right, we're ready to go. Let's start making this happen. Let's feed production data, real life content to support this real life use case into what we built. And then it's the gremlins start to come out quickly. It's rough because it's kind of like you're at mile 22 of the marathon when this happens sometimes, when organizations do that wrong. And it's so the resistance is really around, let's call it ostriching, if that's if it's coming out of my mouth correctly.
Easy for you to say. All right, good. So I've got maybe 2 more questions for you, but we actually have one coming in. So the question is, what does the day in the life of a customer look like when a contact center is enabled with that particular capability? So it's a little bit around well, I'll just let you can see the question. We actually had a chance to put it on the screen, our efficient back office team.
Yeah.
So go for it.
No, appreciate the question. And customer can, that means a couple of different things. So I'll say that there's different end users that are humans, right? And what the experience looks like is that agents are being delivered accurate information in a timely manner. And because of that, they're using it to create better outcomes in their interactions with the end customer, with the caller, with the person that's on chat. It means that the leadership of the contact center has a clear understanding of how better knowledge is creating better business outcomes, because there's transparency and data to support that can be easily ingested into your Snowflake, your Databricks, whatever, and say like, yes, like there's a clear correlation and we can prove this out. So it means that there's better dialogue going all the way up to the C-suite around the things that contact center is doing to drive efficiencies within the business. and help ensure that that brand's integrity and standing in the market is headed in the right direction.
Yeah, I mean, you can take that question a lot of different directions. I appreciate this sort of the canvas that you laid there. So my last question is just sort of open-ended. We've covered a lot of ground here. We've talked about the customer, we've talked about the ROI, we've talked a little bit about the technology, not so much. But I'd like to sort of give you an opportunity to cover any topics or a headline that you want to leave with the audience around how to think about knowledge management going forward. So the floor is yours.
Okay, great. All right, so just a little context. GPT 3.5 comes out. I think the first thought from people was knowledge is maybe irrelevant, doesn't matter anymore. Then fast forward a little bit, it's like, okay, wait, hold on. We need to use all this stuff that's in these knowledge bases. And then fast forward a little bit more, and it's like, wait a second, we don't know what's in these knowledge bases. We need to be able to govern this, get a handle, understand what we have, and figure out what we can use. And then where we're getting to now is, holy cow, this is something that is not going away. And traditional approaches and potentially traditional technologies are not equipped to do the job that actually needs to be done, which is to be able to essentially automate the identification of issues. Otherwise, you're just going to have people with a bunch of ulcers around what is going to leak out of my agent assist, my bot, whatever that may be. So I'll say that it's really about understanding the importance of the data quality and understanding what you said, Tom, is that atrophy happens all the time, happens quickly, and you can't be reactionary to this. You need to be able to have a proactive posture if you're actually going to advance these initiatives that people are asking you to advance, specifically Gen AI ones. But like, even if you're on this, even if you're listening to this conversation, and you're like, Gen AI is a couple of years down the road for us, it doesn't absolve you, right? Like, there's still an expectation that you want to and need to do things to help empower your agents, even if the delivery mechanism is a more traditional search or more traditional answer assist type of functionality.
Fantastic. One of the, just sort of as a summary to all of everything we just talked about, a lot of what we're seeing is technology is being brought in as the solution to a lot of various problems. But I think there's also a lot of evidence that says the enabling technology is key, but you need to start with the business process, the human, the user design, et cetera, around it. And so this is a good example where these two things sort of fit together very nicely. And so this is precisely the reason why you and I are having this conversation today, is because between the process side and the technology side, I think we have a good story to tell between those two. But so with that, Colin, I would like to thank you very much. I thank the audience, thank the question, et cetera. I look forward to our next conversation. But for today, thank you, Colin Kennedy, one of the founders of Shelf. Everybody have a great day.
Thanks, Tom. It was a pleasure. Happy to join anytime in the future.
Outstanding.